Have you noticed this? Someone asks for a favor, and before your mind even responds, your mouth already says yes. Not because you want to, but because saying no feels dangerous. You don't want to disappoint. You don't want to look rude. You don't want to lose approval. So you perform. You smile. You agree. And slowly, without realizing it, your life stops feeling like it belongs to you. This isn't kindness. This isn't selflessness. This is psychology. A silent training of the mind, where staying agreeable feels safer than staying authentic. And the scariest part? Most people who can't say no don't even know when they stop choosing themselves. Let's talk about why. Nobody is born unable to say no. This behavior is learned, slowly, quietly, over years. At some point, you learn that agreement keeps things peaceful, that saying yes avoids tension, that resistance creates problems. So your mind adapted. You were praised for being easy, rewarded for being understanding, and corrected the moment you pushed back. Without noticing, your brain connected approval with safety. Not saying no started to feel like survival. Over time, this becomes automatic. You don't think anymore. You respond. Yes at work. Yes with friends. Yes with family. Yes even when your body feels tired and your mind is already screaming. This is not weakness. This is conditioning. A psychological pattern where your identity slowly shifts from who you are to how useful you are. And the most dangerous part? The longer this pattern runs, the harder it becomes to hear your real voice. Because when you always agree, silence feels safer than honesty. But this is only the beginning. At some point they do try. They enter rooms. They sit among people. They speak carefully. But every interaction feels like a test. Every word feels measured. Every reaction feels monitored. Not because others are cruel, but because their mind never turns off. They overread tone. They replay conversations. They notice small shifts others ignore. And slowly, connection starts to feel exhausting. So they pull back. Not suddenly, but quietly. They learn that peace comes from control, and control comes from distance. It's not fear that drives them away. It's mental cost. They protect their energy. They limit exposure. They choose environments where silence doesn't require explanation. To the outside world, it looks like avoidance, but inside, it feels like survival. Because when interaction demands performance, solitude becomes the safest place to breathe. Before you learned how to explain yourself, you learned how to obey. As a child, silence was safety. Agreement meant approval. Questions meant trouble. So you watched carefully. What made adults happy? What caused disappointment? You learned that being good often meant being quiet, being cooperative, being easy to manage. And every time you followed instructions, without resistance, you were rewarded. Not always with praise, sometimes just with peace. Your mind remembered that. Authority became something you didn't challenge. Rules became something you accepted. And saying no felt like crossing a line you weren't allowed to cross. This pattern didn't disappear with age. It just changed faces. Teachers became bosses. Parents became systems. Discipline became expectation. So even now, when someone speaks with confidence or power, your body reacts before your mind does. You agree. You comply. You shrink. Not because you want to, but because your nervous system learned long ago that resistance comes at a cost. This isn't weakness. This is memory. And it's still running the script. At some point, saying yes stops being a habit and starts becoming an obligation. People don't need to force you anymore. They only need to ask. A look of disappointment, a pause in their voice, a reminder of everything they've done for you. And suddenly guilt enters the room. You feel responsible for their feelings, for their comfort, for their expectations. So you give, not because you can, but because you're afraid of what happens if you don't. Afraid of being seen as cold, selfish, ungrateful. This is emotional pressure. Not loud, not aggressive, quiet, subtle, and very effective. You start measuring your worth by how much you sacrifice, how available you are, how easy you are to use. And every time you ignore your own limits, your body remembers, tension builds, resentment grows, but you keep smiling because conflict feels heavier than exhaustion. And slowly, fear becomes the reason. You stop protecting yourself. When you keep saying yes, something starts to disappear. Not all at once, not dramatically, just slowly. You feel tired even after resting, irritated without knowing why, empty after helping. You begin to notice a quiet anger, not toward others, but toward yourself, for always showing up, for always giving, for never stopping. Resentment doesn't come from cruelty. It comes from ignored limits. Your body carries what your voice never said. The more you suppress refusal, the louder your exhaustion becomes. You stop asking what you want. You stop knowing what you need. Your identity shifts again. You are no longer a person with boundaries. You become a function, a solution, a convenience. And the hardest part? People don't notice the cost. They only notice when you stop. Because when you train the world to expect your availability, your absence feels like betrayal. At some point, something changes. Not outside, inside. You start noticing the moment. Before you say yes, the pause, the tension, the discomfort. And for the first time, you don't rush to escape it. You realize something important. The fear you feel is not danger. It's conditioning. Your body learned to associate refusal with loss, with rejection, with conflict. But awareness breaks the loop. You begin to understand that saying no is not aggression. It's information. It tells the world where you end and where others begin. At first it feels wrong. Your chest tightens. Your mind looks for excuses, but you stay still. You let the silence exist without filling it. This is the quiet rebellion. Not shouting, not explaining, not performing, just choosing yourself without asking permission. And slowly, your life starts to feel like it belongs to you again. After a while, you stop explaining yourself, not because you're angry, not because you're cold, but because you understand how expensive explanations are. You notice how often you were trying to be understood by people who never intended to listen. So you step back, you speak less, you reveal less, you protect your inner life. This is not hiding, this is privacy. You stop broadcasting your pain for validation. You stop performing strength for approval. You let your actions remain quiet, and your intentions remain invisible. And something strange happens. The pressure reduces. When nobody is watching closely, you breathe differently. You make choices that don't need applause. You move in ways that don't need permission. Living unseen doesn't mean you don't exist. It means your life is finally yours. At some point, you realize something uncomfortable. Most of your decisions were never really yours. They were reactions. Reactions to faces. Reactions to expectations. Reactions to the fear of being misunderstood. Approval wasn't encouragement. It was a leash. And every time someone nodded at you, you felt safe, but smaller. So you begin to detach. Not dramatically, quietly. You stop asking, will they like this? And start asking, can I live with this? You allow pauses in conversations. You allow disappointment in others. You allow silence to exist without rushing to fill it. This is where power shifts, because a person who doesn't need approval cannot be easily controlled. They don't argue much. They don't explain much. They don't beg to be seen. They simply choose. And for the first time, your yes becomes honest, because your no finally exists. For some, the question isn't why they are alone. It's whether they can ever belong. Years of distance build walls, invisible but unyielding. Layers of self-protection, layered over vulnerability. They watch others form bonds, participate in rituals of friendship, and sometimes they long for it too. But longing alone isn't enough. Trust must be rebuilt, boundaries must be tested, and every step forward feels like stepping onto thin ice. They are cautious, hyper-aware, always measuring, always calculating, and yet it is possible. A shared silence, a single gesture of authenticity, a conversation without performance. That's all it takes. One human moment to crack the walls, even slightly. Because reconnection isn't about needing people. It's about choosing them. This is the moment most people never reach. The moment you stop explaining. The moment you stop performing. The moment your yes becomes yours, and your no finally exists. It isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It's quiet, almost invisible. And yet, this is where freedom begins. This is where your life starts to belong to you. No longer controlled by fear. No longer shaped by guilt. No longer borrowed from the approval of others. It's simple. It's profound. It's yours. And the world keeps moving. But for the first time, you're moving too.